Good morning, traders. A very happy Thursday out there to everyone. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there last night, and should be a nice day in front of us here. Before we go diving into the charts, just good to note, we have just a figure out at 8:30 for the U.S. there. That's going to be our unemployment claims. And then really outside of that, we have a mild figure at 10 o'clock, that morning inflection point, and then a natural gas figure there. So a couple figures in the queue, but that 8:31 will be our first one to take into account unemployment claims there. But with that said, gives us some time here. We can come over here and blow up our daily charts here on the ES. Not that we have moved things too much further there from where we were, closing yesterday. We did put in a slightly lower low in the Globex session. We traded down to 45, 48, 75, but still no major breach outside of this, prolonged range that we've been, building out for ourselves. So we did put in, it was an outside down bar there yesterday, so we've already traded below the previous day's low, and now we're back up inside of yesterday's range, continuing to rotate, if you would. What we also have going on is just as if this were a intraday chart, a 5-minute chart if you would, our moving average, the 20 period EMA on the daily charts, is continuing to rise up. It's just a matter that we haven't had too much of a downside response as of yet to get too close down towards that area, but just to have it on the sheets, the daily EMA comes in here at 45.23 and change, so ways down there. Up above, we've been slicing on both sides of it, so it kind of loses some of its significance, but as far as the 5 SMA up above, we have that coming in at 45.73 there, basis the S&P, so some zones to kind of be aware of. Of course, way up above is the high that we had from last week's trading, the 46.0775. So that of course remains untested, but more or less that's kind of some zones there, if you would. We have the 45, 44.75 down below, 45.73 up above, just as far as the daily configuration goes. When we come over here to our intraday charts, hourlies, 120-minute data. Either or is going to give us the same, type of feeling. And we did have some, decent selling pressure during yesterday's action. So we've been going through this phase, a little bit more rotational, almost the bracketing market mode after having a nice, standard deviation move to the upside. So we've been rotating for the most part. So we have the overnight low, the 45, 48, 75. We could see we're, marching back up. As far as like major divergences or things along those lines, not so much the case. We just kind of came down and compressed in the range overnight, and now we're just, coming back up, polishing off some of the damage that was done from yesterday's trading. So I do like being out here on the 120-minute display. We have, some nice zones down below, likewise zones up above, and we have plenty of room to, kind of rotate inside the core of all this work. And as we know from what we were seeing on the market profile chart, we know that we have a pretty dense, high volume node on through this area. So all of that to consider as well. But for now, a little counter-reactive lift in the ES trading right in the bulk of yesterday's range there. And we'll keep an eye, daily charts, 5 SMA, and everything as far as the ES goes as we get closer towards the opening. But so far, not too bad there. A nice, tiny range there in the Globex session. Over here with the DAX. Continuing its march to the upside as well, we have been working on some nice closes on one side of the 5 SMA here for the DAX. Overnight, we have an inside range bar, 16,554 would be the 5 SMA down below. So for now, we have ourselves an inside range bar. If you look at the intraday charts, the 30-minute or even the hourly data, all that's going to show up as just a simple pullback, a little rounding action. So they're consolidating pretty nicely from yesterday's high test that they had left. So we'll keep an eye here. Mark off 16,612. It's the overnight little cycle as well as our previous little tail that we had left there from our original move to the upside. So not much to fault there on the DAX. Kind of just coming in marked with a pullback here towards the hourly moving average. So not too bad there. That's our ES and our DAX respectively there. Then we can come over here to the currency spectrum, the EC, which also, had been picking up some good action yesterday. So we know the 1.07745 over here on the daily bars coming back beneath previous reaction high. So we tested beneath that yesterday, and now we can see overnight we've had a good sequence of high to low bars. So they traded lower low overnight, and all we're doing is having some mild counter-reactive lift. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to shuffle our lines all over there. So 1.07745, nice zone to kind of monitor there for that of the euro currency. For now, they're working on one pause bar of green on the daily charts. Come over here to the 240, not really much is going to shift aside from the fact that we could just see with a little bit more detail that we're putting in more work inside of our impulse bar that we had to the upside. Here's that same 77.45 that we did trade on the other side of. We can see we're kind of just rotating. Note the oscillator configuration here. We've been making lower lows on these 240-minute displays, almost kind of like our 1, 2, 3 pushes down, and even an extra little wiggle. So we'll keep a watch on this oscillator in case they do try to firm up at all. We'd have the 120 and the 240-minute EMAs up above. The EC has had its fair share of heaviness here as of late, so we'll see as to how that one handles its opening. But 1.07745 might be a little early morning over and under there for that of the euro currency. Then on the same token, as it commonly is, the 240-minute moving average, if we showcase any sign of firming up, which for now it's pretty mild, but you can see the 240-minute EMA would come in just a notch below where that 5 SMA on the daily chart comes into sight. So EC will be one worth keeping an eye on there today. It's at a fairly interesting location, so we'll keep that one on the watch there. And then moving on along, we have the gold next in order here. GC put in an inside range bar on the close yesterday, so a little balancing act there after having, shifting some that upside momentum back to the downside. We already had our follow through from our big healthy red bar down, and then yesterday, like I said, we spent the day consolidating, so we had a nice inside range bar. And as we can see here in the Globex session, also relatively tame, but we are working towards the tail. We had 2053.4 as the previous day's high in the GC, the gold. So we're inching ourselves towards that region. We did have a balancing act there, so we can get some better range expansion working with the gold. But what we'll have going on here is, for one, previous day's high, the 5 SMA and the 2-day high all coming in relatively close to each other. So when we come over to the intraday charts, 120 minute for this instance here, we already know we worked off this buy divergence, or loss of momentum if you would, on the 120 minute. Lower low in the price, higher low in the oscillator. Also, having already reverted back to the mean as well, the 120 minute moving average. So, up above here, you can see a little bit of a window. Didn't spend a whole lot of time between this 2059 and 2072. So, those would be zones of interest up above. Should we, push up any further in the gold. And then on the other side of the coin, in case we have some adverse reaction, we do have some morning data point there. So the gold, using this kind of 27.6 as a caution zone. If the gold dropped back beneath that zone, that wouldn't be a very constructive look for them. But for now, they're maintaining themselves, trading right inside of the tail area from yesterday, and we'll keep an eye here between that previous day's high and this bit of a zone, if you would, on that 120-minute display there for the gold. Will be nice, some nice zones to keep in mind there. And then we have the crude here. Obviously, crude having quite the extension there yesterday. Bring this guy over here. We need to blow it up just there we are. Blow it up just enough so we could see that previous low that we had broke from the 72.37. So we sliced through that fairly well. And not only did we close below it 2 days ago, we closed below it again yesterday. So good extension. Also, in the one time framing mode here with the crude, the lower highs and the lower lows. If we blow this up nice and large here, we also know on the dailies we're back inside this very large prolonged built out range on the crude on the dailies from when we that was in our earlier portions of the summer months there as far as the crude goes. So they came down. We're seeing some mild action. I mean,
really too much play around the round number of 70 even, but we did trade inside of yesterday's bar. When we come over here to the 120 minute or the hourlies. Of course, the nature in which we extended ourselves to the downside yesterday, we had some fairly good selling pressure. So on this crude, we don't have any divergences. All we're doing is simply coming up off of a reaction low and just moving, back up. But 72.37 is way up there, so even though we are consolidating and having some counter-reactive lift, it's a ways to travel, for that 72.37. So still going to be under pressure. The other thing to consider is if this were an intraday chart, we have all these consecutive red bars down, and so far we have a pause bar of green. Granted, it's a daily bar, but that similar feel, after having good selling pressure, a pause bar of green is just simply our first reaction up off the lows that we've had. So they've been forming these little continuation patterns, and we'll see how that all pans out during today's action. For what it's worth, 70.61 would be the 120-minute moving average there for that of the crude. But good extension yesterday, and then blowing these things up in the bigger picture really helps show that we're back inside this big prolonged previous box area that we had. So that is there for the crude, and we have the bonds here. Bonds having quite the march there yesterday. Good extension. Zoom in these ones here since we carried the ball so far there. Bonds, it's not quite as established as something like the DAX, which was in more of the one-time framing mode, but the bonds we have had are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so we have a bit of the extended run feel going on with these 30-year bonds. Overnight, we have been able to consolidate a notch, so we've seen a brief pause bar. And when we come over here to our hourly charts, we'll just blow these down a little here. So good response to the upside. We've proceeded to pull back. So what we could very well be forming here with these hourly bonds is some type of A, B, C type of wave just to kind of digest some of that good upside progress we had from yesterday. So this one will also, I'm sure, look nice on the MP display since we had this good march up. And then we came down, consolidated a good portion of it, had our little counter-reactive lift to back up, and now we're just kind of filling out some range, digesting some of the good upside progress that we had from yesterday's trading. We do have 119.11 here as the 5 SMA to consider in case we have any further response down in the bonds. But once again here, this pausing action is very reflective here on this hourly, more of a complex correction that we've been putting in. So we'll keep tabs on that hourly display coupled with those dailies in the case of those bonds. And we have the yields here just for fun before we get into our morning data point here. A little bit of a gap up opening on the yield, so we're opening here at 4.261% basis those 30 years. So with that said, we got our unemployment claims data point coming up here shortly, so I want to let that settle in and see what we have lining up for the day in front of us thereafter. So I'm going to let that come out and see how all these markets respond to that data point there.